This week on the 414 Live, case studies. Case studies are typically terribly underused in B2B marketing. Either that or their content is so sterile that they have a negligible effect on target customers. This week, I'll be speaking with Kevin Anderson, who has arguably perfected the art of turning regular case studies into customer success stories, which connect with people at a deep and an emotional level. So, unless your website and social media content is already packed, and I mean packed, with killer case studies already, you need to watch this week's show because it will be truly enlightening for how case studies should be produced. Good morning. Welcome to the 414 Live. My name's James Rostance and we are live on LinkedIn Live. So if this is the first time you've seen the show, welcome along. We produce the 414 for you as a professional B2B marketer, for you to be able to expand and enhance your professional knowledge each and every week. And we do that by interviewing some of the greatest and most interesting minds in B2B marketing. Now, this week is certainly no exception, and I've been looking forward to this because case studies, very much in the tech industry in particular, are very guilty of being generally quite sterile. It's all features based rather than benefits in particular. And you know what? B2B buyers are still real people at the end of the day, and there's a real art form in communicating what your product or service can do for them. So, to help you understand a better way of doing it, joining me live from Dundee in Scotland, welcome, Mr. Kevin Anderson.
Very good morning, James. How are you?
We've got you live on the show. I'm really good, actually. To the viewers, a quick apology for yesterday's test run, we'll call it that. We had some technical difficulties on the show yesterday. It was the internet. It wasn't anything else. What else could that be? A hostage situation? No. So it was just it was a basic internet problem which caught us out, and so that's why we're doing it today now at 11:30 rather than our usual time of a Thursday at 11:30. But anyway, so Kevin, thank you for joining us, and we're going to be talking today about B2B customer success stories. This is your rather unique take on it. So could you start by explaining what are generally the flaws in regular B2B case studies?
Yeah, James, again, thanks for having me. I think the major flaw is, frankly, that they're boring, dull, and a little bit predictable. Yeah, they're what I call kind of formulaic. Now, there's nothing wrong necessarily with the problem, solution, and result kind of framework. It's still a kind of a story, and that's okay. Unfortunately, most case studies don't have a really important element of any story, which is a human. So the human voice is kind of silenced. The human is nowhere to be seen or heard. We talk about the business. And in your introduction, you talked about, the concept of we're in the business of working with people. It's a people-to-people relationship as much as it is a B2B relationship. And I think that's what a lot of the case studies really, really miss out on. They don't have that human connection, and people just don't connect with them.
Nice. So what would you say then are the challenges that marketers face when trying to share and create regular case studies? What are the challenges?
Yeah, I think there's a few challenges. I think the first overarching challenge we all face, regardless of what content we're producing, is that we live in a really, really noisy world. There's a lot of content that we are competing with. So trying to get people's attention can be really, really difficult. So for me, probably the biggest thing is to make a shift to be a storyteller. Okay, so I think marketers in general, the best marketers are storytellers. So we need to embrace our storytelling side. Think about it. We as humans spend time, at the cinema, watching box sets, reading books, consuming stories. So it makes sense that those are the kind of content that people are going to be more interested in. So that's number one, is, you really need to embrace being a storyteller. Number two is scary. And number two is scary for marketing professionals. And when I've worked with some bigger corporates, the communications team kind of recoil in terror when I say this next one. But we have to be a little bit vulnerable, okay? So, if we're going to tell a story that people, well, let's why are we telling a story in the first place? Why are we sharing a case study? Surely it's to build trust. Yeah, it's to build relationships. It's to give people an idea of what they can expect if they work with us. And unfortunately, a lot of the case studies I read, and you mentioned tech. I worked in tech for a few years, and a lot of those stories were, what I call painting a picture of project perfection. In other words, this was a problem. We solved that problem by doing these wonderful things, and then everything was just wonderful. The end. Now, I'm sure you've worked on hundreds, possibly thousands of projects. How many projects have gone perfectly?
Well, ever, yes.
Yeah, there's good projects, there's bad projects, there's better projects, but there's never a perfect project. So if we want people to read our stories, connect with our stories, we have to allow a little bit of here was a challenge. We tried this thing, didn't quite work. We regrouped and we tried this thing and it did work. For me as a buyer, that would give me confidence that you, as the business that I'm going to work with, can solve real problems.
Got it. So, I really like that. So, what should we as B2B marketers be aiming for with a case study that works?
We should be aiming for, what we should be aiming for in life, which is just to be more human. We need to inject a human being into the heart of this story. I think too often what we do is we talk about Smith & Smith had this problem. They worked with Jones & Jones, and this was the result. Now, it's very, very hard to connect with an amorphous thing as a business, as a limited company, as a corporation. We connect more with human beings. And for me, that's where we need to be focusing our attention, is draw out, who are the real heroes of the story? Who are the people within the organization that actually represent the business? Let them be the voice. Let them tell the story, rather than talking about a collective of people, for example. Talk about one person. Here's that one person, and here's the problem they faced. That way, people will kind of connect because it's a human at the end of the day.
Indeed. Kevin, at this point, it would be cool actually to put the opportunity out for viewers to put a question to you live, which we'll come to in a few minutes. If you have a question on developing case studies or indeed customer success stories that you would like to put to Kevin, please do put it in the comments box right now and on my iPad on the side here. I will read out your questions and put them to Kevin so that you can have your questions answered. So Kevin, back to you then in the meantime. What are some of your favourite examples of case studies that you've been involved with? Also, let me correct that. Customer success stories that you've been involved with.
Yeah, first of all, just that little correction there. I just want to address that a little bit. The term, case study, customer success story, client story, impact story. There's a lot of different terms for what is a case study, what isn't a case study, and I think it's all down to the client. If I'm working with charities, it's impact stories. If I'm working with universities, it's impact stories, and ultimately, you have to decide what you call them for yourselves. But the common denominator, whatever the title is, that they should be a real story. They should be a real story. So, to your question, yeah, absolutely. I'll share an example of trying to draw that human aspect out of a story. So I worked with a learning and development company who were looking to get a series of case studies done. One of them was with a financial services company. Now, I was interviewing the managing director of this organisation. His business challenge was essentially that his leadership team were still too reliant on him. You know, he was still getting involved in things that the leadership team individually should have been taking responsibility for. So, the business benefit, the lovely thing of the story, the learning and development company works with the leadership team, and they benefit. Wonderful story, but the story goes much deeper. So when I was interviewing the managing director, one of the things that came out is that what did it actually mean to him? So for me, it's always about the follow-up questions. I go into case studies, client stories with a list of questions. But sometimes the power is in the follow-up questions. So to him, he talked about the benefit. The team's got more confidence. They found their voice. They've got more clarity from working with across a series of programs with this coaching team and professional development team. So I asked them the question, what difference does it mean for you? And this is where the power comes from. So what difference has it personally meant to you, was the question I asked. And the answer was, and he's very vulnerable. He said, listen, my stress and anxiety levels have dropped dramatically. And more importantly, I'm now able to spend more time with my family. I don't have to be here as much. So essentially, through working with this L&D company, his leadership team, has stepped up. His leadership team has improved the situation. But by asking that follow-up question, certainly for me, what I will remember more about the story is how that managing director feels as a result of getting that problem sorted. He's less stressed, he's less anxious. And the reason I think it's so important, James, is ultimately, if another managing director is reading this story, who is going through a stressful period, who has got challenges with their leadership team, hopefully they would then be encouraged that, wow, the problem that is being solved is a problem that I'm actually living through right now. So for me, that's a really good example of drawing out the personal aspect of a story.
No, yeah, so what I'm getting from that then is I've picked up two things. One, that you go to trouble there to really dig deep into the actual problem. Yeah. And the second part, yes, where you're then actually connecting on an emotional level between the person who's the star, if you will, so that then other people can also connect with that based on their situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you're looking for people to resonate and see their problem that they're facing right now reflected in the story that they're reading, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that connection, and it does tie back to what's the central problem that was solved, and what is the impact of that.
There we go. What's that famous adage? People buy with emotion and rationalise with logic, or have I got that the wrong way?
Correct. No. I think. Yeah.
People buy with emotion. Yes, yeah. There we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Kerr Matheson asks, I'm an audio producer. Is there a place for audio-only client stories? Maybe as podcasts? That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think how creating a case study, a client story is one thing. It's then about how do we distribute it and how do we share it with a wider audience. And we have to watch that. I'm a reader. I like reading things, but everyone's got their own content preference bias. I'm imagining you quite like video, James. I'm just going to put that out there. I imagine you're quite a video fan. But the bottom line is that really you need to be sharing these stories as far and as wide as possible. And yes, absolutely. You could create a series, a series approach to a podcast. So here's a podcast series, and here's maybe 5 or 6 client success stories. And of course, Kerr's an audio engineer, so he could intersperse that with some kind of sound clips of the work that he does, and could do something a lot more creative. And I think that's that question leads to the key point here, is that just creating the case study or the client story isn't enough. We've got to use them strategically as part of how we communicate, and that means thinking, could I do a video version? Could I do an audio version? Could I do a written version? Could I collect them in an ebook? What are all the different ways that I can creatively get these stories out there?
Nice. So then that would be more than just box ticking, as I guess is a lot of the case with case studies. Oh, let's get a case study, put it on the website. There we go, job done. What you're advocating is almost having a mission in a way associated with case studies, so that you produce great case studies that connect with people to start with. And the second part of then getting it out to people in a variety of different media. Listen, I started my career and I've spent my career since I was 18 in business to business marketing. So, you've got to get that balance right between, because let's face it, build it and sometimes they will not come. Build it, produce your case study. Sometimes people aren't going to see it. They're not going to be in the right place at the right time. So you have to actively go to where your audience is going to be and give them the opportunity to consume your stories in the way that they prefer. Beautiful. I'll go to another question, if I may. See more. Becky Smith. Hello, Becky Smith. Asks, any tips on how to get clients to sign off on a case study? And in particular, metrics that prove value. And she's got more. She carries on with, many PR teams, especially in larger companies, are very resistant to share details and even endorse companies.
So let's start with what was the first part again? Just remind me.
First part, I was.
I'm looking at. I've got it. I've got it right in front of me here. So good. So in terms of getting the sign off, part of that is really right at the start, managing expectations and building up that rapport and relationship, framing what the story is about, and making sure that I've got my own process, and everyone will have their own kind of way of working. But absolutely getting the client sign off is critical to this. You can never share a case study without getting that sign off. My way of working is if it's me working with a client, we'll have that discussion, and normally the client will be the one that gets in touch with the client to get the sign off. But I think if we go on to the particular metrics, and again that's kind of down to the client to make sure that they are using kind of Google Analytics, for example, to make sure that they are being how often are they being downloaded? Are they actually being used? And then the real ultimate proof is, does the case study help you to sell more of your services or products? And again, that'll be largely down to engaging with your sales and your marketing team and having those conversations to see exactly how they are being used in the real world. It can be a difficult thing to say. I was in a sales support role for a while, and it can be difficult to say, how do you attribute the sale? Was it the case study? Was it the sales call? Was it the presentation? Was it the proposal? Was it the sales rep? So it can be difficult to attribute, but for me, you have to get the metrics right just to make sure that people are actually seeing them. And if they're not seeing them, if they're hidden away on your website, you've got to work harder to get them out there into the wide world. So maybe social media campaigns, etc. And the last bit, some larger companies are very resistant to share details and even endorse companies. Yeah, absolutely. So I think sometimes, I've been in a situation where I've said I'd love to get a testimonial, I'd love to get a case study, and it's just as a flat thing, they're commenting saying, "No, we don't do those." So sometimes that's just the reality of where you're going to be. For me, I've been fortunate with the clients I've worked with that the client and my client's client has a good relationship. So normally a lot of that is kind of teed up and we've already gone through that. The other option, and you can anonymize case studies. So it might be, listen, you can tell the overarching story, but I don't really want our name out there. Now, they're not as powerful, they're not as real, but they can work. And in certain industries and sectors, protecting the privacy of individuals is really important. I worked at basically secure accommodation for young people. So obviously we can't talk about those individuals, but we can tell the story and remove their name from it and do everything that we can. But the story is still powerful, but it's more powerful if we can use a real name. Does that answer the questions?
I think that answers it beautifully. And yeah, in fairness, Becky Smith gets the award for best question posed to us so far on the series. Well done.
Well done.
Yes. I've got to say hello to Tom Bryan, who's done a bored sleepy emoji. Thank you. That's our second hater.
Wow.
Gotta love that.
Nice. Oh, God.
Bored
is there any
sleepy.
Is there any way of putting that on my fridge? That would be lovely.
I'm good at making physical things, so let me have a think about that.
Please.
Right, I'll send it as a gift for things on the show. Nice.
Excellent, thank you.
If you've just joined us, welcome to the 414 Live, produced exclusively for LinkedIn Live. This is the show that we produce for you, professional B2B marketers, for you to expand and enhance your professional knowledge each and every week. Here on a Thursday at 11:30, and it's available as a podcast as well. Search for the 414 Podcast on your favourite podcasting app and on our YouTube channel, where all the episodes, including subtitles, are put up there. So Kevin, you, I dare say, have got a system for this, for how to actually produce the case studies. Could you talk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'll do is I've got the process from my perspective in terms of working with my clients. But what I'll do is I'll simplify it and talk about it in a scenario for maybe one of your viewers or listeners that would want to do this for themselves. So the first thing that they need to do is start with the end in mind. So what's the strategic purpose? What's the point of the case study? Why are we sharing? Why are we sharing this individual story? What is it we want to get out of it? What's the business imperative? Once you've got that, it's then a case of speaking to the person within your business who had the more direct relationship with the hero of the story. So the person that we interview for a case study, I call them the hero. So they're the hero of our story. So we want so it might be an account manager, it might be the managing director, it might be the marketing manager, but who is it that had the more direct relationship? And we essentially work with them to draw out the information and get a rough version of what we believe internally is the story. From there, it's then about creating questions, and the questions are the key thing to draw out, and we'll come on to that in a little minute. But once we've got the questions, we interview our client, we interview them, we work with them, and then it's a case of let's pull all that together. And as I said before, we ask the questions, but sometimes the power is in the follow-up questions. Then what we do is we write the case study. We get the case study written and we share it maybe internally with our team to see, does this story, back to that starting with the end in mind, does that story actually work? Does it fulfill what we set out to do? Or has it kind of missed the mark a little bit? Once we've kind of internally signed it off, it's then a case of sending it back to the hero of the story to get their approval before we can do something with it. So that is the kind of process. But I think the most valuable thing for your audience would be to take them through my story stack model, which is my kind of storytelling framework, which is particularly useful for when you're trying to build the questions. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'll introduce you to that. So the story stack model, essentially at the top we have our hero. So the hero is the person that we care about. It's the person that drives the story. They don't necessarily have to have done anything heroic, but we have to care about them. So in your case, James, it might be a client you've worked with on a video project. They're the hero. Mm-hmm. They're the hero of the story. That hero has to have a goal, something that they want to accomplish. In the traditional case study format, that's really the problem. What's the problem that we're looking to solve? I have lots of things that I want to achieve in life, lots of goals, and sometimes we need an event. So the third element is the event. In movie terms, it's what we call the inciting incident. It's the thing that happens that makes a sometime goal become a, I was about to swear there, become a, right, we really need to do this thing right now, okay? It's what gives it a sense of urgency. So those three elements are kind of the start of the story. Then we have the obstacle. What's the obstacle? What's the barrier? Why can't they just achieve the goal for themselves? What's holding them back? What's restricting them? Is it money, finance, knowledge, skills, talent? What is the thing that's holding them back? From those obstacles, we then come to the mentor. James, are you a Star Wars fan?
I'm not, no. I was more into Action Force and Transformers, I'll be completely honest. So if you could reference Optimus Prime, that would be good.
Yeah, easy.
Cool.
So back to Star Wars. So like the mentor. So if you're working, James, with your clients, yeah.
Sorry. Could you do that one again? We had a vision mixing mess up then. So you.
Right. Okay.
Going back to the client.
Yeah. So ultimately, you are the mentor in your story. The hero is the person that you've helped. So James, if you're working with somebody, you're the mentor, you're the person that helps, and the hero. And it's important to not become, it's what I call the jazz hands moment. In which case, when we're a lot of case studies, we can't wait to talk about ourselves. So the mentor, and I use the Star Wars example, Obi-Wan Kenobi's the mentor. He's just a geezer with a hood and a beard that downplays his role in helping the hero of the story. And that's the way that we need to be with our stories. So the mentor has an important role, but it's not our story, it's the hero's story. And then we have the journey. And the journey's the highs and lows and the ebbs and flows. So that's what happens, what are the set piece moments in our story. If a story goes like this, nobody cares. We want to see variance. We want to see things change. We want to be excited. We want to be interested. So it's really, really important that we don't just tell a flat story. It's also back to vulnerability that I mentioned earlier on. It's also about putting in there some of the things that didn't go quite as well and how you overcame them, because I think those are really powerful. And then when we come to the end of the story, we're looking at what's the change, what's the difference. If there is no change, there is no story. Simple as that. So what is the change, and what kind of levels of change can we look at? How's the organisation changed? How has the individual, the hero, changed? And how have they changed, not just on a professional level, but how have they changed on a personal level? And then we finish off the piece with the lesson learned. So what is the lesson that we've learned from living through this story? What's the moral of the tale? What is that final message that we want people to take away from experiencing and living through that story?
Wow.
That's the story stack. I normally do it as a full day workshop, but that's a short version for you.
Yeah. I really like that. So whilst you were talking, then we'd got the graphic up on screen of your story stack model, and so just as a quick recap, just through each of the sections, we'll pull the graphic back up again. Could you talk us through the elements one by one?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the hero at the top. We then have the goal. We then have the event, which is the trigger point for the story. We then get into the heart of the story, which is what's the obstacles and the barriers that's stopping them. Then from the obstacles, we then come to who's the mentor that's going to help our hero. Then we have the journey. That's the set piece moments. And then we come to the end, where it's what's the change? What's the difference? Has the problem been resolved? And then finally, with a nice little bow, wrap it up with here's the moral of the tale. Here's the lesson that we learn from living through that story.
That is quite beautiful, and I can really see how you could turn, I don't know, an air conditioning system a regular case study of just that by using your model, right? How you could actually make that mean something to people. Nice.
I've used it for predominantly kind of consulting, coaching, IT businesses, but I've also had the privilege of doing some kind of charity-based stories using this model, and it really helps draw out the heart of the story and the power of the story.
Absolutely. Right, I think we've got time for one more question then. So this is from Johan Ingles. Or Ingalls, it might be. Johan, I hope I got that right for you. Thank you for the question. He says, is there a difference between what's expected in a case study for a bid rather than case studies generally?
That's a really good question, actually. That's a really good question. One of my things with case studies, client stories is about repurposing them and sometimes reframing them and reusing them in creative ways. So and it might be a bid, it might be a tender, it might be, and ultimately you'll get guidance from the person within the organisation that is putting out the tender of what they're looking for. If you go too far wide of the mark, then you could actually do yourself a disservice. So I think first thing to do is manage the expectations. What are they expecting to see? And you might have to compromise a little bit on the basic story that you've got, the foundational story. You might have to go back in and tweak it to suit the format. The other thing is that I've done a few bids, worked with people for things with Scottish Enterprise, for example, and sometimes what you've got is a box of a limited amount of space. You're only allowed 350 words for this aspect. So then it's really about how can I edit that original case study down into something that's more manageable. Or you can do what I did for an event, a nomination for a client in Australia, which was we got a little bit creative. We didn't have much room for text-based case study, so we put in a few testimonials and then used the leftover space to put in some links to some online case studies and videos as well. So I think. Is there a difference? I would like to think that the story is the story and we can use it everywhere, but we have to be sometimes pragmatic and realistic about the expectations of the people that we are going to be tending for. Hopefully that answers Johan's question.
I think that does it perfectly. Well, Kevin, thank you ever so much for joining us today. I think this has been a beautifully enlightening, as promised, episode of the show. Excellent. Kevin Anderson, live from Dundee. Thank you very much, sir.
You're very welcome. Just one final thing.
Yeah.
You can now add that like you don't work with children, animals, or small hairy men from Scotland on live TV. Okay. Listen, thank you for your patience. Apologies to your guests who missed out yesterday, and I really enjoyed the conversation, James.
Hey, me too. Brilliant. Have a great rest of the day. Perfect.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for watching as well. This has been 414 Live. We're here each and every week, 11:30 a.m. on a Thursday, to help bring you some of the most interesting and greatest minds in B2B marketing for you to expand and enhance your professional knowledge. If you're not already subscribed, please do subscribe on your favorite podcasting app, or indeed our YouTube channel, where all of the episodes are put on there, and we also get them subtitled as well, so you can watch them on your commute, in the bath, or just dinner party with friends. Absolutely, that would make one heck of an evening. In the meantime, I've been James Rostance. This has been the 414 Live. Thank you very much for watching.